Fresh from last night's debates there in Las Vegas, we're pleased to welcome Senator Hillary Clinton. Senator Clinton, good to see you again. Welcome back to Power Lunch.
Thank you so much, Bill. It's great to talk to you and Sue.
It is clear that since the last time you were with us, the economy has taken center stage in this campaign. You have an economic stimulus package, $70 billion on the table. Senator Obama has a similar package on the table in terms of the amount of dollars. Senator Edwards has talked about stimulus as well. Robert Samuelson, writing in the current issue of Newsweek magazine, is not impressed, the economist. He calls it lollipop economics, saying that in a $14 trillion economy, $70 billion is at most nothing more than political symbolism and at worst a small drop in the bucket. What do you say?
Well, I think that what I'm proposing has to be part of a larger set of both fiscal and monetary policies. You know, people are hurting. They're losing their homes. They're losing their jobs. I've met them here in Las Vegas and around the country. And I think it's important that we move quickly to try to stem the bleeding. It also will help, I believe, maybe build up a little bit of confidence in the economy again. We have big problems. You know that. You report on them every day. But I have proposed a way to put a moratorium on home foreclosures for 90 days to see how many we can work out to prevent a cascade of foreclosures with all the consequences that represents. I'd like to see interest rates and mortgages frozen for 5 years, which I think complements the monetary policy that the Fed is pursuing. I also want to see more transparency from the servicers and the brokers, and to put together a $30 billion fund that would, give support to communities to prevent what I think will be a much worsening housing market with all of the consequences that represents. I want to put $650 in the hands of people who need help paying their energy bills, make sure we've got a good, robust unemployment compensation system, with these layoffs that are going on. You know what happened with Citigroup the other day.
Right.
Again, I think it's contagious. And I want to do something else. I want, number one, to get some money into the jobs of the future, the clean energy jobs. We could put people to work here in Nevada and California, across the country, actually doing the work that is going to build us a better energy future and move us away from our addiction on $100 a barrel oil. And I also have in reserve a contingency of $40 billion for additional tax rebates. Now, I think all of us are coming forward on this. I've been talking about the economy. I talked about it with you some weeks ago because I could feel that we were going to end up where we are today, sliding into a recession. The president going hat in hand to the Saudis, basically saying, please help us out again. We've got to get focused on what we need to do short, medium, and long term, and that's going to require new leadership.
Quickly, let's be clear, though. Are you saying you can avoid a recession with a plan like this, or do we just let the business cycle take its course at this point?
No, I don't know that we can. Some economists, as you know, say we already are. In fact, the governor of Nevada says that his state's already in one. But we can certainly do what is necessary to try to make it shallower and less long-lasting. And I think we've got to do that because we're really in a different environment globally right now. We know that we've got the huge spike in oil prices over the last several years. I mean, look at the spike in oil prices since George Bush became president. We know that we are increasingly indebted to other countries, and we now are not only indebted to them, but our private institutions are borrowing from sovereign wealth funds so that we've got it kind of coming and going. We don't have a sensible energy policy, and I think that's one of the biggest problems in the economy. Right. The fiscal stimulus that Bush pushed so hard in 2001 and beyond has gone primarily to people who are, going to weather this crisis because they are so wealthy and they are so much better off than the rest of us. So I think we need to say, look, we've got to take some short-term action right now. That's what a stimulus is for. Then we've got to do a much better job in getting back to fiscal responsibility. Let's make investments that will make us richer and safer and smarter and stronger, like in clean energy, for example. Then we've got to take stock of, the indebtedness, the $9 trillion debt, and the rest of what is happening now in the global economy that I believe can undermine our fiscal sovereignty, and I take that very seriously.
Senator, you brought up the sovereign wealth funds, and I'm glad because it's something that obviously is a hot-button issue in Washington, and in a recent NBC News poll was one of the major concerns of voters. You have said in the past that you would like to see more transparency. How, though, if you were president, would you achieve that? Because if the shoe was on the other foot, a lot of people think that the United States would be very reluctant to open itself up to the type of scrutiny that's being suggested on these sovereign wealth funds. How would you do it?
Well, Sue, we don't have the equivalent of sovereign wealth funds in the way that we're seeing them develop around the world. You know, we have a private market. Obviously, the government plays a role, but we have private players who make investment decisions based on profit returns, based on what they think are in the best interests of their investors. When you mix politics and government with these investment funds, that's where we run into the questions that are being raised.
Would you suggest, would you be in favor of stronger caps on the amount of money that these sovereign wealth funds are allowed to put in, or the stakes that they are allowed to take in the likes of a Citigroup or perhaps a Merrill Lynch?
Well, here's what I want to start with. I want this to be an international solution. I want to see the IMF and the World Bank get into this, along with governments like our own, because it's not only the United States. I mean, you know, the investments from the Sovereign Wealth Fund at this point in the United States are not going to disrupt our economy. That isn't the case in a lot of other countries where they could be much bigger players. But we need to get a hold of this now. We need to move toward transparency. If there are rules on investment caps or stock ownership or the rights and privileges that go with certain classes of stock, we need to start looking at that. Because I do believe that when you mix governments and huge capital flows, run into trouble. I mean, one of the reasons that I've raised this is, you know, we do have a lot of other business going on with other countries. And sometimes we are aligned and sometimes we are not. Sometimes our strategic national interests are not the same. So if government officials are basically calling the shots on investment and disinvestment, that puts a whole new factor into how the global economy needs to work.
Senator Clinton.